So what do we do now? Shall we discuss this molecular orbital valence bond theory, or we go straight to the vibration rotation as part?
I think we should discuss this molecular and vibration theory.
Okay. You see the molecular orbital part, molecular orbital theory, we already know. Uh, but there is an alternative method of working out this electronic structure of simple molecules like H2. And there, you see it is written there. No, it was in the note before that. Anyway, you write the wave function. Yes. That is one treatment. That was the first treatment, actually. That was historically the first one. Before molecular orbital theory, that was discussed, that was suggested by Heitler and London in 1927. Slater and Mandy Pauling elaborated on that. Now, what do we do in that method? We take the wave function of non-interacting atoms, multiply them. So F1, we take 1 as A1, 1 as B2. We are talking about the ground state function of the hydrogen molecule now. So for ground state function of the hydrogen molecule, we have one electron on A and another electron on B. But that is not the only one, because electrons are indistinguishable. And if we have one electron on A and number 2 electron on B, we can have as well number 2 electron on A and number 1 electron on B. Both are valid forms. So to find the real wave function, you just add up these two terms and apply a variation treatment. That will give you some integrals. Yeah, can you go down now? Yes, these integrals, you have to evaluate H11 equal to F1A, F1, S11 equal to F1, F1, and so on, H12 and H22. And then solving this determinant, you will get the energies for a particular value of the internuclear distance. So this is a secular determinant, more or less like the same thing in molecular orbital theory. The method is the same, but of course the starting wave function is very different. You see, when we compare this difference comes out very clearly, because, well, let us have the next note. Okay, I think these are quite easy. You'll be able to follow them, more or less like the previous things. But of course, with a different wave function. And so we can write the hydrogen molecule wave function, a triplet and a singlet state both. The triplet state, for the triplet state, the orbital wave functions will be antisymmetric with respect to electron interchange. And for the singlet state, they should be symmetric with respect to electron interchange, because the singlet state has opposite spins and the triplet state is parallel spins. So to make the total wave function antisymmetric, the singlet state, the space function, space part of the singlet state, see, any molecular wave function consists of two parts. One is space part and one is spin part. If the space part is antisymmetric, the spin part must be symmetric. If the space part is symmetric, the spin part must be antisymmetric, at least for 2 electrons. If we consider only 2 electrons. So with these 2 electrons theory, these are the singlet and triplet wave functions when we use the valence bond theory. But of course, in the valence bond theory, the Hamiltonian is differently partitioned now. We say HA1 equal to minus half delta 1 square minus 1 by RA1 and so on for HB2. That means electron 1, as if it fills only the attraction of nucleus 1, and electron 2, nucleus A, sorry, and electron 2 fills only the attraction of nucleus 2. And the remaining part, where like RB1, RA2, and R12, the internuclear repulsion, they are taken as H prime. And then we can solve this method. Let us go to the next. No, Yes. So this whole energy can be expressed in terms of Coulomb integrals and exchange integrals. Exchange integrals, this H prime, the matrix element of H prime is taken between two exchanged electronic functions, SA2 SB1 and SA1 SB2. In Coulomb integrals, they're taken between the same electronic functions, SA1 SB2, SA1 SB2, H prime. So these Coulomb integrals and exchange integral, if you can evaluate them, they are enough to give you the energies in the valence bond method. So can you go to the next set of notes? No, this is all right. You can see that what energies do you get, and you see the valence bond is slightly inaccurate, more inaccurate than the molecular orbital theory. Why? You see, let us take the molecular orbital theory wave function now for 2 electrons. So the first electronic wave function, we have seen that the lowest molecular orbital can accommodate 2 electrons. So, and what is the, just a minute. হ্যাঁ হ্যালো, আমার ওটা হয়ে গিয়েছে, আমি এটা বলার জন্য বারবার ফোন করছিলাম। হ্যাঁ, প্রবলেম সলভ হয়েছে। আচ্ছা, yes. So you see the lowest state wave function, this will accommodate 2 electrons, and the lowest state wave function in the LCOMO method is phi A1 plus phi B1. We're leaving out any normalization factors and things like that. So phi A1 plus phi B1, and so the electron 2 wave function will also be phi A2 plus phi B2. And if we just multiply this, there are 2 electrons, so the total space function will contain 4 terms. Of these 4 terms, you see the first 2, phi A, the last 2 rather, the last 2 are same as the covalent valence bond wave functions we started with in the valence bond theory method. But there are other 2 terms, the first 2 terms, which are phi A1, phi A2 plus phi B1, phi B2. These are not present in valence bond theory. So in molecular orbital theory, the simplest MO theory for hydrogen molecule H2, we have 4 terms for the wave function, but in valence bond theory we have 2 only. Now what is the difference between these 2 sets? You see, the first set is called ionic terms, and the second set has been called the covalent terms. Why? Because in the second set, if an electron is on nucleus 1, the second electron must be on nucleus 2. So phi A1, phi B2, and of course you can interchange the electrons and get phi B1 plus phi A2. But in the first 2 terms, they are called ionic terms. They are called ionic terms because both electrons remain on the same molecule, I mean same nucleus, phi A1, phi A2, but there is another possibility, phi B1, phi B2, that electron 1 is on A, near A, and electron 2 is also near A, or alternatively, electron 1 is near B, and electron 2 is also some kind of hydrogenic wave function. So these ionic terms. So there is a small diagram here. So for the ionic terms, the structure looks like this. Either A is a H minus because it contains 2 electrons, and B is a proton, bare proton, or A is a bare proton and B is a negatively charged hydrogen. So combine all these possibilities, ionic and covalent. There are 4 in all to get the simplest molecular orbital theory. So what we do in valence bond theory? In valence bond theory, just you can see that in molecular orbital theory, there are 4 terms, and we neglect the first 2 terms, the ionic terms, and you get the valence bond wave function with the covalent terms only. There is no ionic term. So you can ask, why should we have ionic term? Because ionic term will not cause bonding. That was the original idea of Heitel and London, because ionic terms do not cause bonding, and they took the covalent terms only. But however, we are talking of a quantum mechanical system, and in the quantum mechanical system, there can be some possibilities that at some time both the molecules may be on, sorry, both the electrons may be on nucleus A or both the electrons may be on nucleus B. So there is certain probabilities that if you just measure the nuclear cloud density, you will have at some time you will have strong electronic cloud on A and none on B. But of course, the covalent terms should also be there. So you see, in valence bond wave function, there is no ionic terms, and in the, so what we can do, we can try to improve the valence bond wave function, taking this into account that in the quantum mechanical system, the electrons may be close sometimes. We do not know how close they are, so let us put the ionic terms together and add them to the covalent terms with a variational parameter delta, which we call delta. And delta, of course, will depend on the internuclear separation. So delta is a function of capital R, and this is a variational parameter, and this gives the improved valence bond wave function. Somewhat, we could expect it to be somewhat better than a simple valence bond wave function, and because it includes what is called the ionic covalent resonance. That is, a wave function is a time-independent mixture of ionic and covalent states. See, the first two states are simply covalent states, and this next two states, which are multiplied by delta, are covalent state. Because why delta? Because we will find the optimum value of delta. We don't know what delta is, and we can expect delta to be less than 1 because the covalent terms should be more important than the ionic terms. That is why we have kept delta here. This is an improvement of the valence bond wave function. On the second thought, that we look at the valence bond theory result and see that it is somewhat worse than the molecular orbital result. And then we see, oh, the molecular orbital has 4 terms, the valence bond has 2. So let us put another 2 terms and let us see how important it is. And if you do the whole calculation, of course, when R goes to infinity, delta infinity should be 0. And when you do the whole calculation this way, we get delta equal to 0.26. And D is 4.03 electron volt. And we can also make some nonlinear variation on the charge of the electron, because the charge of the electron will not be exactly, they will not feel it like 1. There will be effect of other electrons and other nucleus. So the orbital exponent, optimized orbital exponent, will be for this 1a, for this 5b1 and 5a2, etc. terms, the optimum orbital exponent will be 1.19. So this is some improvement on the original valence bond theory. Down please. What's next? Okay. Now see, what is the weakness of the LCO-MO wave function? In LCO-MO wave function, if we expand this wave function, you get 4 terms. So in 4 terms, the covalent terms and the ionic terms are on the same footing. This is also difficult to accept because we can expect that in a molecule, most of the time, the electrons will be equally distributed over the 2 nucleus. Somewhat rare, it will be somewhat rare when they come together to be on the same nucleus. So most of the time, if you make the measurement on the electron cloud density, you will find the electrons distributed over the 2 nuclei. Sometimes you can see that both electrons are close together. So what do we do? In LCO-MO function, there is no scope for saying that electrons are close together or not, because the simplest molecular orbital theory always give you this first term, phi a1 phi b plus phi b1 multiplied by phi a2 plus phi b2. So what we do, we include a configuration interaction. What is the configuration interaction? Have you get configuration interaction in atomic physics? Yes?
No, sir.
No. Okay. Configuration interaction is just you include higher terms, higher orbitals in your calculation with a variational parameter, and then try to optimize these variational parameters. So what we do, the lowest MO wave function is this one, phi A1 plus phi B1 multiplied by phi A2 plus phi B2. What should be the next configuration? In the next configuration, we can say that gamma is a variational parameter multiplied by phi A1 minus phi B1 multiplied by phi A2 minus phi B2. Can you see why this is so? Why phi A1 minus phi B1 and phi A2 minus phi B2? Yes? What else can be did? Do you think there is some kind of cheating here? What else can be the result? Why phi A1 minus phi B1 and phi A2 minus phi B2? Why?
To make the symmetric.
Exactly. Because the next orbital, molecular orbital, lowest molecular orbital is of the form phi A1 plus phi B1. And the next molecular orbital is of the form phi A1 minus phi B1. We know. But of course, phi A1 minus phi B1 gives you a U state. Ungerade.
Yes,
But
sir.
you know, the ground state should be a Gerade state. So if we put the second electron in the U orbital, if we put the first electron in the U orbital, the second electron should also be in the U orbital. So these configurations can interact. 2 electrons in G, ground state, and 2 electrons in U, they both give you combined G state. So you can, only G state can interact with the G state, we have seen that, and cause a new state. The G state cannot interact, cannot mix with the U state. So we take the lowest GG state, G for electron 1 and G for electron 2, that makes up a G state, or U for electron 1 and U for electron 2, U makes another G state. So this combination we take of the 2 G functions, lowest G functions, and 2 lowest U functions, but we put a gamma, which is the variational parameter, before the excited state. So what is the modification? In valence band wave function, we include ionic terms which are left out originally from the valence band wave function. We include some ionic terms with the variational parameter and try to optimize this variational parameter. In the LCO function, these ionic terms are already overestimated. So to reduce the effect of ionic terms, we take resort to configuration interaction, and the lowest configuration we can add to is both the 2 electrons are on the next U state. So that the total wave function is a G wave function. And then we can go as the valence band wave functions, improved AMA and improved valence band wave functions are identical. After some simple algebraic manipulation, we take the covalent wave functions phi 1, phi b2, and phi b1, phi b2, and in that case the coefficient, the ionic terms will be 1 plus gamma divided by 1 minus gamma. So this is improved valence band, improved molecular orbital wave function. And then you can use the same variational treatment, 1 plus gamma and divided by 1 minus gamma. That now plays the role of the variational parameter delta in the improved valence band theory. Improved valence band theory, we have taken the parameter delta for the ionic terms. So in the improved covalent theory also, where we use the configuration interaction, use the higher configuration, we'll get the same type of wave function. After all, here 1 plus gamma by 1 minus gamma, the original variation parameter is somewhat modified to play the role of the actual variation parameter. So we see that the improved molecular orbital wave function, the improved valence band wave function. How do we improve the molecular orbital wave function? By introducing some ionic terms with a variational parameter. How do you improve the molecular orbital wave? How do you improve the molecular orbital wave functions? By including configuration interaction, the higher configuration. And how do you improve the valence band wave function? by including ionic terms with the variational parameter. So in both cases, variational parameter enters and the wave functions become identical. So valence band wave function with the inclusion of ionic terms is identical with molecular orbital configuration, molecular orbital theory with configuration interaction when you take the lowest configuration into account. First excited configuration, rather we say, into account. So electron correlation, what is electron correlation? That is due to the repulsive force between electrons. If an electron is near nucleus 1, we can say that it is unlikely that the second electron will be also near nucleus 1. The second electron will tend to be closer towards nucleus 2. That is electron correlation. This is overestimated in valence bond theory because we always put the two electrons on two different nuclei. And our term, when we include the ionic covalent resonance correction term, this overestimation of the ionic terms of valence bond theory is reduced, while the molecular orbital theory overestimates. When we use the ionic covalent resonance term, this underestimation of the ionic terms by valence bond theory is reduced by ionic covalent resonance. When you use the correction to the molecular orbital theory, the ionic terms is overestimated because we get them on the same footing. So we should reduce the influence of the ionic terms, and so this is changed. Electron correlation, effect of electron correlation is increased by configuration interaction. So you know now what configuration interaction is. In atoms also, we will learn the configuration interaction theory, how they are applied. We take the electrons in different atomic orbitals and then take all the possible configurations which give rise to a particular state, and then use the standard variation theory. And you can get the ratio of the configurations in one state. Here also we can do that. So now there are examples of other homonuclear diatomics. I have written down the valence bond wave function for the helium molecule He2. The He2 has 4 electrons. 2 of them should be on near nucleus 1 in valence bond theory. 2 of them should be on nucleus 1, 2 of them on nucleus 2, and the 2 that will be on nucleus 1 should have opposite spins denoted by a bar. These are actually spin orbital wave functions. So one SA1, one SA bar 1, and the other electrons, 2 electrons will be one SB1, one is SB bar 1. And in that, so this antisymmetrized product will now be a determinant of these 4 terms. This is without the ionic terms. See, pure valence bond wave function of the helium-2 molecule, where one SA1 and one SB1 are helium atom 1s wave functions. And how do you calculate the helium atom 1s wave functions? You have to do self-consistent field calculations of the atomic wave functions for helium atom. But it can also be approximated by a hydrogen-like wave function with an effective nuclear charge. So you do this with helium molecule. This is a valence bond wave function for a helium molecule containing 4 electrons. Well, next. Yes. So ground state helium-2 configuration in a molecular orbital theory, the G state will contain 2 electrons, so it will be sigma G 1s2, and then the U state will contain 2 electrons, so sigma U 1s2. So there is no net bonding electrons, and we have seen that already. The helium molecule will not be a stable molecule. Okay. Next. Okay, we need not go into that. You go through this and you will understand this very well. Well, what is next? What we have shown is that this molecular orbital wave theory with configuration, this particular configuration is identical with the valence bond theory. And we have written down the singlet and triplet valence bond wave functions of the hydrogen molecule here. Then we have shown some excited state hydrogenic wave functions and their potentials. You see the lowest molecular orbital configuration is 1 sigma G2, and this gives him only a non-degenerate singlet sigma G plus level, which is called X singlet sigma G plus. The ground state level is always called X, capital X. Next lowest is the molecular configuration 1 sigma G, 1 sigma U, but this does not give rise to a sigma G state. It gives rise to a sigma U state. And there can be, because there are two different orbitals involved, this triplet, this U states can be singlet or triplet. So this lowest molecular, second lowest molecular configuration 1 sigma G, 1 sigma U gives rise to two different U states. Both are sigma, but one of them is singlet and another of them is triplet. See, they are different. One of them has the same this 2s plus 1, the superscript, which is called multiplicity, as the X state. So singlet sigma U plus, and here the ground state is singlet sigma G plus. So both are singlets. Because both are singlets, we write this excited state as capital B before the term designation. So capital B singlet sigma U plus. But the other state is a triplet one, which has a different multiplicity from the ground state, and the ground state is capital X. So this state will also be B state because it's the first excited state, but with small b because it is a different multiplicity. And by Hund's rule, the small b state will lie lower because it has a higher multiplicity. And we have written down the wave function of the small b state in detail. This is a triplet state, so they can have three different. The wave function, the space part of the wave function will be antisymmetric, and the spin part will be symmetric, and they can have three different spin functions, giving net spin of 1. That is why the multiplicity is 3. And for the capital B state, of course, the space part will be symmetric and the spin part will be antisymmetric. So there is only one spin part, and there will be only one function, B singlet sigma U plus, one spin orbit function. So these three curves are shown here. X singlet sigma G plus is of course the lowest state. Above that lies a B triplet sigma U plus, which is as a repulsive wave function, which is a repulsive potential curve. That means in H2 molecule, the first excited state is repulsive, but the next excited state, the capital B singlet sigma U plus, that has a well. So you can have excited bound H2 plus. Sorry, H2. Okay. Now tell me, what do you think? Have you understood this?
Sir, can you repeat once about why 3 sigma G is 3 sigma U is lower than
that is Hund's rule. Just Hund's rule states
due
that
to multiplicity.
yes, the state with the highest multiplicity will be lower. You can understand this in a very rough way, because if the you see, if the electrons have the same spin, the electrons have the same spin, will try to avoid each other, right?
Yes, sir.
They cannot be in the same state. So classically, we might think that they cannot be in the same region of space. So the electrons with the same spin should try to avoid each other. This has nothing to do with electronic repulsion. The electronic repulsion is also always there, but this is a quantum mechanical effect due to Pauli exclusion principle, that the electrons with the same spin will try to avoid each other. And if they try to avoid each other, they will remain the average distance of them. Just can I see the diagram again? the potential energy diagram. Yes. So if we have the, what was he saying? Yes. If they try to avoid each other, then remain on the average rather far away from each other, and the electron-electron repulsion effect will be less. So it has a positive effect on the potential energy. Electron-electron repulsion is positive energy. So the positive energy will be less for triplet states and they will be lower. But for single states, there is no such restriction because the electrons are antiparallel. With antiparallel spins, they can approach each other more closely than the electrons with parallel spins. And so the interelectronic repulsion will contribute to a much higher extent, and the single state will be higher than the triplet state. This is just a justification of Hund's rule, you can say.
Okay, sir.
It applies to atoms also. Okay. Then let us go to vibrational spectroscopy. Any problem? Yes. Yes, and that is, of course, we can have heteronuclear molecules also. Now the heteronuclear molecules, when we have heteronuclear molecules, if the difference in electron nuclear charge is not much, then we can just extrapolate the orbitals of the homonuclear molecule to the heteronuclear ones. Of course, the GU states will be missing, the GU symmetry will be missing. But as N2 for N2 is a homonuclear molecule and the nuclear charge is 7, 7. So CO is also a homonuclear molecule, is a heteronuclear molecule, but with the same number of electrons as N2. And the nuclear charge is not that different, 6 for C and 8 for O. So there the states will closely correspond. For N2, 1 sigma G will become, for the CO states, 1 sigma. 1 sigma U will become 2 sigma, that is the first excited sigma orbital. 2 sigma G will become 3 sigma, that is the second excited sigma orbital, and so on. And 1 pi U, which is the lowest pi state, will be 1 pi, and 1 pi G will be 2 pi. So the designations will be like this. GU will be missing. So the orbital designations will be 1 for CO will be 1 sigma, 2 sigma, 3 sigma, 4 sigma, 1 pi, 5 sigma, 2 pi, 6 sigma. So ground state configurations of N2 with 14 electrons are written here, and correspondingly we can expect the ground state electrons for CO, ground state configuration for CO to be also the same, but here sigma G's, G and U subscripts are missing, and we should have the designation of the electronic states different way. 1 sigma G, because there is no 1 sigma U, it will be 2 sigma. But of course, this will not help if the nuclear charges are widely different. For example, you can take HF. HF has 10 electrons, but 1 for hydrogen and 1 for 9 in fluorine, 9 on fluorine. So when they bond, I would not expect them to be bonding to be the same as, say, with 10 electrons of B2, boron 2. Boron 2 structure will be very, very different from the, rather I should say, the hydrogen fluoride structure, HF, will be very, very different from the B2 structure, corresponding homonuclear B2 structure, because the nuclear charge, difference between nuclear charge is so large. Okay.
So what the effect would be like, sir?
Sorry?
What the effect in HF would be like different from this
Yes.
boron?
Yes. You see, fluorine has a nuclear charge of 9, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And and hydrogen is 1. So let us take the first electrons in the fluorine. One is fluorine state and one is hydrogen state. Will they mix at all when hydrogen and fluorine are brought together, brought close?
No, sir.
No, because one of them is much, much lower energy than the other. Fluorine 1s atoms, 1s electrons will be very much lower in energy than hydrogen 1s electrons, and so they will not mix up very nicely. They will not mix up at all, in fact. So they will remain basically fluorine orbitals, atomic fluorine orbitals. And similarly, when you go up, only the 2s and 2p orbitals will mix with hydrogenic orbitals. And here we will have some different kind of orbital arrangement.
Yes, sir.
That is why we say that the outer electrons can only take part in chemical bonding, because when the nuclear charge is so different, the inner electrons remain as atomic electrons basically on the higher nuclear charge atom.
Yes, sir.
Okay, should we now move to the vibrational spectroscopy? Yes, this is easier actually, at least the first part, because you have already know Born-Oppenheimer approximation, and the Born-Oppenheimer approximation, you calculate the total energy with fixed nuclei. This total energy you called En for the nth electronic state. And so if we, yes, if we put this En0 in the Schrödinger equation, we get this simple equation within Born-Oppenheimer approximation. H prime plus En0 chi nm equal to Enm chi nm. Now, can you tell me two things? Why is there H prime and why M? Yes, please. Have you deduced the Born-Oppenheimer approximation?
Sir, it is like perturbation, I think.
Yes, it is perturbation, but what is contained in that perturbation, H prime? The terms you neglected in Born-Oppenheimer approximation, what are these?
Nuclear
Nuclear
motion.
kinetic energy, nuclear kinetic energy terms, right?
Yes.
And why M? Why do you need another quantum number? Because in electronic terms was just H0 chi n, H0 psi n equal to En psi n. That was the Born-Oppenheimer equation for the electronic structure with fixed nuclei. Now the nuclei are not fixed, so we do the Born-Oppenheimer calculation first. We get the Born-Oppenheimer potentials, call them En0, and now solve the equations of nuclear motion with this Born-Oppenheimer energies as the potential energy, right?
Yes, sir.
So we need two indices. Why? Because we first need to specify what exactly the electronic state we are using. The electronic state is the nth electronic state. Just as we saw earlier, a little bit earlier, the hydrogen, three different electronic states of hydrogen molecule were shown. There's X sigma, singlet sigma, and capital B, triplet sigma, and small b, triplet sigma, and capital B, singlet sigma. So that gives you N. So maybe N equal to 1, 2, 3 for these states. And why M? Because we're solving another Schrödinger equation with En0 as a potential term now. The Born-Oppenheimer energy is now the potential energy term. And H prime is the nuclear kinetic energy. So when the nuclei move, because the nuclei move more slowly compared to the electrons, when the nuclei move, they see the Born-Oppenheimer energy as the potential on which they are allowed to move, right? The nuclei move on Born-Oppenheimer energy curves as using them as potential curves. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
But any Schrödinger equation, for Schrödinger equation, has some bound solutions. And this is a Schrodinger equation for a nuclear motion. H prime En0 plus En0 chi Nm equal to Enm chi Nm. And so it needs to specify the nuclear state with another wave function, with other indices. And these indices are given the name M here. There can be more than one. M can contain a set of indices. But however, for the quantized nuclear motion, we need another set of indices which we characterize, which we denote as M. So N, the first index here denotes the electronic state, and M, the second index here, denotes the nuclear quantum number on the nth electronic state. Well, any question?
No, sir.
So En0R is the potential energy function for the electronic state, and K10 is given by the Born Oppenheimer approximation. These new indices, this now includes the internuclear potential, of course. So when you discuss the motion of electrons, we cannot take only the electronic potential, because just the electronic potential, because there is also the nuclear repulsion term, and that will also affect the nuclear motion. So here, this En0 is just the Born Oppenheimer electronic energy plus the internuclear repulsion energy. If we do not include the internuclear repulsion energy, we will not get a representation for the nuclear motion, because nuclear motion is also affected by internuclear repulsions. So we have Born Oppenheimer electronic energy plus the internuclear repulsion energy that acts as the potential for the potential energy function for the nuclear motion. Right? So here En0 also includes the internuclear potential. And then if we now apply this to a diatomic molecule, this equation for the nuclear motion only. So H prime for a diatomic molecule, what will be that? That will consist of the nuclear energy terms, nuclear kinetic energy terms for the two nuclei. So here minus H square by 2m1 del 1 square minus H square by 2m2 del 2 square. These are H prime for diatomic molecules, right?
Yes, sir.
Nuclear kinetic energy of nucleus 1
Nuclei.
plus kinetic energy of nucleus 2. The electronic motion has been averaged out, and they are all contained in En0R. So we are talking of a single electronic state now, nth electronic state, and are trying to find the nuclear motion, the nature of nuclear motion on the nth electronic state. And nuclear motion needs, description of nuclear motion needs quantum numbers, and these quantum numbers are now M, the second one. And since we are dealing with diatomic molecules, we can say that the Born Oppenheimer potential is simply dependent on the separation of the two nuclei. That is a scalar internuclear distance. Because what happens if the nucleus is rotated, the internuclear potential remains the same, and the electronic potential also will remain the same, because it does not change with the rotation of the molecule as a whole. So our potential energy term, the Born Oppenheimer potential energy term, is function of the scalar distance, scalar internuclear distance only. And so the wave function will also be a function of the scalar internuclear distance. If we take the, well, let us go to the next page. We see that delta 1 square and delta 2 square is Laplacian for the nuclear coordinates. So what we should do, we have already done this in times. I was just mentioning that the potential energy for the nuclear motion will depend only on the internuclear separation and not on the internuclear orientation. So this potential energy is a function of capital R scalar only, En0, function of capital R scalar. And so we can separate the Schrodinger equation We have done that already for central forces. When you did hydrogen atom, we separated the angular momentum part from the radial part. The angular momentum part gave an equation whose solution was spherical harmonics, and the radial part was dependent on the nucleus electron attraction for hydrogen atom. Here also we do the same thing basically. We take we separate the Schrodinger equation as R theta phi equations. So the R equation contains the potential. This is the equation for the scalar, rather let us say this is the R equation, scalar R equation, minus h square by 2 mu. Yes, we have also changed to the center of mass system so that the effective mass becomes mu m1 m2 divided by m1 plus m2. This is the reduced mass of the 2 electrons. That will be the one. So basically we are changing the two particle Schrodinger equation into a single particle equation. We can do that for central forces we have seen earlier. And so the energy equation remains, becomes minus h square by 2 mu L square plus En0 r of chi nm r, so on. And you know it already. The angular equation will have spherical harmonic solution because the potential does not depend on the angular coordinates. Right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is the angular part, just like a electron in center potential, and this is the radial part, and we can separate them, and both sides will be a constant. You know that already, how to separate the differential equation of more than one variable into two different equations and things like that. And the angular part has solutions y, we know them already as spherical harmonics. So if there's spherical harmonics, this C constant becomes automatically, we have derived that as J plus 1. And J is the rotational quantum number. Just like in electrons, in atoms, this C was LL plus 1, where L is an azimuthal quantum number. Here also, we get J plus 1. Instead of J, we can, instead of L, we are writing J here. So the constant is J plus 1, and J is the quantum number of total angular momentum. This is the total angular momentum of the nuclei. We are not considering the electronic states, electronic angular momentum right now. So these are the angular momentum of the two nuclei rotating about the center of mass, and we know the energy of such motion is J plus 1 h cross square by 2 mu r square, and this is acts as the centrifugal energy in the radial term. This also was true for atomic motions. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Any doubt?
No, sir.
So we take the model of rotating diatomic, first concentrate on rotation only. That is on the angular part. That means the radial part we fix up. Radial part is fixed, radial distance. Radial distance between the two nucleus is fixed, and we take it to be capital R. So if the molecule rotates about the center of mass, like a rigid rotator, the molecular distance, internuclear distance does not change during the rotation. It remains R. So you can calculate classical momentum inertia. This is mu r square. Simple, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And so the total angular momentum will be J plus 1 into h cross. And D1, E perpendicular is just the unit vector to show that the total angular momentum is directed perpendicular to the nuclear axis. See, if the atom molecule rotates like this, then its angular momentum must be perpendicular to the nuclear axis. Right?
Yes, sir.
So this is the vector perpendicular to the nuclear axis. We choose this vector as the z-axis, and so we have constant angular momentum. And we have a constant angular momentum. Now this is true for a sigma state where there is no contribution to the total angular momentum of the system from the electrons. If sigma is not zero, if the electronic angular momentum is not zero, this is non-sigma state. If it is a pi state, that means that the electrons have some total angular electrons also have some angular momentum to contribute, right? If lambda is equal to 0, the total angular momentum of the electrons is 0. If lambda is not equal to 0, the total angular momentum of the electrons is not 0. What happens for a pi state? What is lambda? Can I have your reactions?
Non-zero, sir.
What is value? Pi state. What is the electronic angular momentum for the pi state?
One, sir.
Yes,
L is equal to 1.
1. And in which direction?
Along the axis of the two nuclei.
Yes, exactly. Along the internuclear axis. So here we have now two angular momentum. One perpendicular to the axis, that is due to the rotation of the molecule as a whole, rigid molecule, and one along the axis, that is due to the electrons. So when you compound these two, the total will not be perpendicular to the internuclear axis. So this simple model of the angular momentum being perpendicular to the internuclear axis holds only for sigma states, but not for pi or delta states. And let us concentrate on sigma state. Let us assume for now that there is no electronic contribution to the total angular momentum, and so this is rigid rotor is a rigid rotor, and R remains constant. The internuclear separation remains constant during the rotation. So we have the potential energy between the nucleus also remains constant. So, and we can see that for a stable molecule, to form, the internuclear potential must have a minimum. We call this minimum RE, and we can say that when the molecule rotates, this RE remains constant. The RE does not change. The molecules, the nuclei in the molecules have a distance RE between them, and when the molecule starts to rotate, it remains RE. That is a rigid molecule acts as a rigid rotor. The R does not change, and so the potential energy between the nuclei, there is a Born Oppenheimer potential energy, also remains constant as the potential RE. And we know that the energy of a rigid rotor is equal to J plus 1 h cross square by 2 mu RE square. We know that already, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So these will be the energy levels of rotation. J will be different integers. So what can be the values of J? 0, 1, 2, and so on. So if we can see the radiation which is emitted when a molecule is de-excited from a J plus 1 state to a J state. What is that? That is the difference between two energies, J plus 1 minus J minus 1.